British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty.
Donald Trump has pledged to bring more water to drought-stricken California from Canada.
Millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
He did sort of suggest water from British Columbia could just be diverted through Oregon and into the Golden State.
It's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
But never say never. Never say never.
That will never, ever happen.
A serious political tension is quietly unfolding across North America. As water shortages intensify in parts of the United States, Canada has taken a firm step that is drawing global attention. Reports that Mark Carney is blocking expanded American access to Canada's freshwater reserves have surprised many in Washington. And now, a deeper question is emerging about survival and sovereignty.
We'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interests of Canadians. This negotiation, ça va continuer.
The latest developments center on rising concern within the United States over long-term water security. In recent political discussions, President Donald Trump highlighted the growing risks facing drought-affected regions and suggested that stronger cooperation with Canada could become essential. His comments brought renewed focus to cross-border water access and whether shared solutions might help stabilize shortages.
We have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
However, Canadian leadership quickly signaled a different position. Mark Carney emphasized that Canada's water resources must remain under national control and should not be treated as a tradable commodity.
British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty, saying the current administration is reviewing its international engagement.
Officials in Ottawa clarified that environmental partnerships and existing agreements would continue, but proposals that could lead to large-scale water exports were not being considered. But the real story is just beginning. Behind this diplomatic exchange lies a broader shift in how both nations are thinking about resource security in an era of climate uncertainty. Recent data highlights why water security has become such an urgent topic. Major reservoirs in the western United States have experienced sharp declines. Lake Mead and Lake Powell, two critical sources of water and hydroelectric power, have both reached historically low levels in recent years. Agricultural regions in California, Arizona, and Nevada have introduced stricter water management rules as supplies tighten. Urban populations are also feeling the pressure. Rapid growth in cities across the Southwest has increased demand, while changing rainfall patterns have reduced natural replenishment. Experts warn that prolonged drought cycles could transform temporary shortages into long-term structural challenges. Meanwhile, Canada holds a unique position globally. Nearly 20% of the world's surface freshwater is located within its borders. From the Great Lakes system to vast northern river networks, Canada's natural reserves provide stability that many countries no longer enjoy. But something else is happening behind the scenes. Policy planners in Washington increasingly frame water not just as an environmental issue, but as a factor shaping national resilience and economic planning. Cooperation on shared waterways between the United States and Canada has existed for decades. Agreements like the Columbia River Treaty helped both countries coordinate flood control, hydroelectric development, and environmental protection. These frameworks were built on the assumption that water supply would remain relatively predictable. Today, that assumption is being challenged. Climate change has altered precipitation cycles, increased wildfire risks, and accelerated glacier melt in certain regions. Population growth has added further strain. As cities expand and agricultural production intensifies, governments must rethink how resources are managed across borders. And this is where the situation becomes more complicated. While past cooperation focused on mutual benefit, new discussions increasingly revolve around scarcity. That shift changes political calculations. Leaders must now consider not only shared interests, but also long-term national security concerns tied to environmental stability. The implications extend far beyond diplomacy. Water shortages can influence food production, energy markets, and business investment decisions. Farmers facing reduced irrigation may cut crop output, affecting supply chains and consumer prices. Hydroelectric facilities dependent on consistent water flow could see fluctuating generation capacity, impacting regional electricity costs. Industries that rely heavily on water, from technology manufacturing to construction, are also monitoring the situation. Companies evaluating future investments must consider whether infrastructure and environmental conditions can support long-term operations. Governments, meanwhile, face the difficult task of balancing sustainability goals with economic growth. Public opinion plays a powerful role as well. In parts of the United States, calls for innovative solutions and stronger partnerships with Canada are becoming more visible. In Canada, however, many citizens worry that exporting water could create dependencies and environmental risks. This difference in perspective is shaping political messaging. But the story does not stop there. As debates intensify, policymakers are beginning to see water access not just as cooperation, but as leverage. But the data reveals something even more significant. Long-term climate projections suggest that water scarcity may become one of the defining challenges of the century. This realization is changing diplomatic priorities. What once seemed like a technical discussion about resource sharing is now viewed as a strategic issue involving sovereignty, influence, and resilience. And that shift is quietly reshaping policy decisions. From a global perspective, the evolving tension reflects a broader transformation in geopolitical thinking. For decades, energy resources such as oil and natural gas dominated strategic planning. Today, freshwater is increasingly seen as a comparable source of influence. Nations with stable reserves may gain new bargaining power, while those facing shortages must adapt their economic and security strategies. Canada's decision to maintain strict control over its water supply signals a long-term approach to resource management. By prioritizing environmental protection and domestic stability, Ottawa is reinforcing the idea that certain assets cannot be easily monetized without risking future security. This stance may influence how other countries approach similar challenges. Governments in regions facing desertification and rising populations are already exploring ways to safeguard critical resources. At the same time, the United States continues to invest in solutions aimed at reducing vulnerability. Technologies such as desalination, advanced recycling systems, and conservation initiatives are receiving greater attention. These efforts demonstrate that adaptation remains possible, but they also require significant time, funding, and political consensus. And this is where the situation becomes truly global. Decisions made today about water cooperation and sovereignty could shape future alliances, trade relationships, and environmental policies around the world. For now, the disagreement over water access remains measured and diplomatic. There are no dramatic confrontations or economic sanctions. Yet the underlying tension reflects deeper questions about how nations will manage essential resources in an uncertain future. Canada's firm position highlights the importance of sovereignty and long-term planning. The United States' concerns underscore the urgency of adapting to changing environmental realities. As climate pressures grow and populations expand, water is likely to become a central factor in global stability. What appears today as a quiet policy dispute may ultimately influence economic strategies, political relationships, and security priorities for generations to come.